Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee or tea with American Scouser. It's the morning coffee. It's Wednesday. That's when I play the most awesome dad or the greatest dad and stuff. So that's back in action. One day a week, I roll with that. And we have, luckily, he has not seen the end of the podcast on Monday, but our very own Egyptian King Ramy is with us as always with Wednesday. What's going on, man?
What's up, Timuchin? Happy to be here on another freezing cold Wednesday, but just happy
Oh,
to be
oh
here.
yeah, because you're in Utah, right?
Yeah, so it's just very
We're
cold this
actually
morning.
Gordon is here with us, and we're having actually a balmy freaking February
Yeah.
over here, which is like really shocking in Chicago. But yep, let's bring him on right away. Gordo is also with us. If you've been following American Scouser since its inception, Gordo is like one of the OGs back in the day. So we're bringing him back over here. What's going on, man?
Not much. How's it going? Yeah, we are enjoying a nice balmy February as long as you batten down your hatches and button up those jackets because got blown off at 3:55 this morning. So
Yeah, it is ridiculously windy. I was afraid one of the dogs was just going to fly off the backyard last night. It was just like rough. Yeah, the house was shaking. And we have Rami on a widescreen over here. What a day. What a day today is going to be. Okay, so a couple of headlines to get to. Then I figured like we'll go to the Champions League. Let's start with this one. I couldn't put it up on the screen yet, but when I was flying solo, I think it was a couple of Fridays ago when the whole Mason Greenwood news came out about we all know how it like kind of like got went away. But I mean, legally, it just went away. So I was talking about at the time that Manchester United's like what they would do, what we would want to do if it was like Liverpool. So like, let me ask you guys this because the news came out that actually the Manchester United women's team, clearly and obvious for obvious reasons, are very against them coming back. Alan is with us this morning. Good man, Alan. And Alan's bragging as always that it's freaking 68 degrees over there. But do you know how snow feels, Alan? No, you don't. See, that's it. But so let me ask you guys, Rami, let's start with you. This is kind of hard to do, I think, but let's try it anyway. If it was a Liverpool player, would you want him back? How would you feel? Because at the end of the day, well, the guy was found innocent. Well, but then again, for obvious reasons, and there's a lot of like stuff that we seen video, audio kind of stuff too. It's not like somebody threw it up in the air and then it wasn't proven, it went away. There is some stuff to match with it. So, how would you feel, or what would you want?
Yeah, I feel like given the evidence, and like you said, he was proven, I guess, not proven innocent. He just the case was dropped. I think those are two very big distinctions. Because given the evidence, I feel like if it was a Liverpool player, I wouldn't want him anywhere near the club. It just, just for example, just the women's team or the women's support, it's just that alone, making them uncomfortable is not worth whatever goals he scores. Combine that with the fact that the club has an image and reputation to maintain, and having a player like that around is just kind of just counterintuitive. It just goes to show that what happens on the pitch is more important than what type of people we have in the club. And so I don't think that should ever be the mindset. And like I said, it's just kind of disappointing that United fans are so willing just to give that up, just because Mason Greenwood scored a couple of goals and might solve a couple problems for them, so that they're willing to just ignore all the evidence against him just because a court cleared him, which was all on a technicality at the end of the day. So I'm just kind of in the mindset that I want the right type of people in our club, players, owners, whoever. And so if there is this type of issue surrounding a player, I don't think it's worth having them around. In my opinion, if Mason Greenwood was a Liverpool player, I'd say send him to Everton or or to the Championship or something. Like I wouldn't want him anywhere near the club. So that's just kind of my opinion on that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weird spot because I mean we all know, and it happens over here a lot, right? In like NFL, like the guy is like shoved away by one team, but then somebody needs a couple of sacks, so they're like, well, I mean he's not that bad, and then just bring him back for like a couple of months. How about you, Gordon? I mean, it's like I say, it's kind of hard to put us in that situation. I've always like if this guy did it or whatever, but almost that brings different variables to it that probably shouldn't matter, But like, where do you stand on it?
So, I mean, in a perfect world, and obviously my own personal beliefs, I wouldn't want somebody like this, much like Ramy said, I wouldn't want him around in the club. But then you look back, and not even 10 years ago, we had a similar situation with Luis Suarez and Patrice Evra. And like, that was a completely, that was on video too. And it was definitely racism involved, and everybody stood behind him, even our African players stood behind him, even Glenn Johnson. Most of the guys after, I remember Jamie Carragher brought up even later that, he apologized for it and probably shouldn't have stood behind Luis Suarez, but Luis Suarez was Luis Suarez, and he'll always be a Liverpool hero. I mean, you could build a statue in front of the stadium and people would still adore him. He definitely was a interesting character and not the best human being, but we all embraced him. So it's a tough call to look on the outside, especially when it's United, because we all just want to hate them and want them to make all the wrong decisions, and look how immoral they are.
They deserve the worst. Yes, I mean,
right.
But I mean, I can personally say I am not a fan of Suarez at all. I mean, at the time, like when he was scoring the goals and stuff, yeah, it was just like, holy cow, this guy is so good. And people can be really good and annoying as fuck at the same time. It's very hard if they. That's what I probably love about the squad we have over the last, I don't know, like 5-6 years probably, where I find it really hard to find like a guy that, I kind of like maybe not too big on, but he's part of the team, so you root for him kind of deal. I felt like, yeah, Suarez is a great example because he's done some shit, and we're not even talking about the biting yet. We're just talking about more like the racist stuff. That it was shocking that he was backed. So, what do you think, Ramy? The players, obviously, we talked about the women's team. What I read was the men's team was split. Is it split because, man, this shit could happen to me too, better be safe over here? Or is it just because he's my buddy, I don't want to screw him over? Why do you think would be split? Like, who can be in that locker room and say, yeah, that's a great idea, let's bring Mason back? That won't bring any attention. Like, who's in the locker room saying that?
Yeah, I feel like if I had to guess, it'd be kind of like the younger players, similar to his age group. Because then, like you said, they can kind of see themselves in that. That's like, oh, I'm one mistake away from my career being over. But realistically, it wasn't like he made an accident. It's like that just seems like it was a pattern of behavior. So I think it'd be like those kind of players who similar age range, similar play style, stuff like that, that feel like they see themselves in him. I mean, I don't think any of the older players, I think they would understand just having that controversy around just isn't healthy for a locker room or a dressing room or whatever. And so, yeah, if I had to guess, it would just be the younger players who, see the impact he has on the pitch and are just like, okay, yeah, let's bring him back. I don't want that same thing to happen to me. I want this to show that, second chances are possible. So then that kind of gives them, not a bit of leeway, but just, a safety net, so they can always point to that Mason Greenwood situation and be like, oh yeah, I messed up, but you guys brought Mason Greenwood back and this wasn't as bad. So I think
I'm using my Mason card.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now they always have that in their back pocket. So if I had to guess, it'd be something like that. But I'm sure the leaders or like the older players are just kind of telling them like, hey, maybe this isn't for the best or whatever. I'd be surprised if it was anybody over 30 being like, oh, okay, yeah, we should bring Mason Greenwood back.
I mean, that's another thing. Not only, I agree with that. I would think like it's the young guys who were his buddies, or maybe that were in the youth team with him or something like that, saying like, give the kid another chance. He was dumb. He was drunk, whatever, trying to make excuses like we did back then in Suarez, like Gordon was saying. But Gordon puts the team in a different spot as well. Because I would think people in the locker room, especially, I wouldn't want that freaking attention. Things are on the more up and up lately. Maybe if it was like last year, they were like, who cares? Just bring him on. It's a shit show anyway. But it feels like things are moving in the right direction, as bad as that is to see. Why bring all that attention and drama to a locker room that he's trying to fix, trying to kind of like weed out, getting rid of? I mean, you got Ronaldo to kind of like help that situation. Why would you pick Mason Greenwood over Ronaldo to create drama?
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. Is they just got rid of a cancer in the locker room. I mean, whether or not the guy's a good player, and I think we can all agree, Ronaldo is one of the best in a generation, and he didn't help the team because of what he did off the field, in the trainings, his attitude. And if that kind of thing puts that divide in the team, it doesn't really matter how good a player is. It's just not going to work. And Ten Hag seems like you said, he's clearing out the dressing room. He's made it a combined unit. I mean, when you look at teams that are overperforming, the one thing you can say about all those teams is they're a cohesive unit. They understand each other. I mean, you don't need 11 of the best players. You just need 11 players that can play well together. And the second you bring in somebody that's going to taint some of that, then I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it. Now, unfortunately for Mason Greenwood, like we've been pointing, he's a young player and he's made a mistake, and hopefully he's, the reason that it's dropped is not, some stupid reason. Hopefully he's improved himself and gotten himself better. And I think honestly that the kid probably needs a stint down in a couple of leagues and work his way back up until he's proven that he has rehabilitated himself and he's still the same player that he is. But going straight back to Manchester United just because it's been dropped in the courts, I don't think is the right move.
Yeah, as he says, I don't see any way back for Greenwood, nor should there be. And he had a comment about Suarez earlier on that I do want to go back to after we finish the Greenwood conversation, because it kind of goes with the Champions League as well. But so that's the second part of the question now, Ramy, is so you look at from the United perspective. I mean, this was one of their up and coming young players. So there was a lot of value attached to him. If you had like a list of assets, he was probably in the middle to higher rank in terms of potential. And if you sold him, how much you can get. So now you release him, more than likely somebody would pick him up, but I can't remember now because I'm old as dirt. But there was something that happened a few months ago where somebody was either convicted or whatever, was brought back to a team, and there was so much backlash in the community. They were like, oh, that was a mistake, and went away. I can't remember what team it was now. I have to dig this out. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was only like 2 or 3 months ago, so it's pretty recent. So who would bring Greenwood in and be like, I'm all for second chances. And like Gordon is saying, maybe he has improved himself, maybe he has learned and stuff, and maybe you should get a second chance. But having said that, it's not like he went and like served a penalty, was found guilty, learned and stuff too. He almost like got away with it, as you will, probably by, through some funds or whatever it might be. We're just speculating, but that's what my guess would be. Ramy, who would bring him in, knowing the moment you announce it, might as well shut down your Twitter account and all that kind of stuff because people are just going to hammer you?
Yeah, I felt like the two criteria are teams that enjoy PR nightmares and are struggling with relegation. And when I think of a team that fits both those criteria, I mentioned it earlier jokingly, but I could see a team like Everton, who just is looking for a lifeline, anything, a distraction even at this point of their season. Like I said, just somebody who dealt with these PR nightmares constantly and it needs a lifeline. Everton fits the criteria. Maybe a team like Bournemouth or just one of those relegation battling teams who just need a spark of life. They'll be like, we'll deal with the hate online for a week or two, and then once he's back and scoring goals and people are seeing his name and all this stuff, everybody's going to forget. I think they could count on that, and who knows, maybe he's the player who keeps them up. And then everybody kind of forgets about the whole situation. Our attention span as a society is very short. People do bad things and we forget about it 2 weeks later once they, perform or act or, score a couple goals or whatever. So I think this would be no different. Like I said, it'd just be kind of that initial PR nightmare. And then I think if a team was desperate enough, I think they'd just take it on the chin and hope he just pays it back on the pitch.
Zahid says West Ham will take him because they kept the cat kicker. And that's the thing. It's one of those. You're right. I would think if he can make it the first month, and like a PR department that's trying to stay busy and maybe overstaffed, people like, yeah, we'll take it. But if he does perform, Gordo, in a month or so it would go away. But who would be able to survive that first month?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And he has to hit the ground running if he stays in the Premier League because, like Ramy said, part of the whole operation is he's still the same player he was a year ago. And if he bags 3 goals in 5 games, then it goes away. It's like, we can sort of forgive him. It doesn't really matter. But if he doesn't start right away, it's just a continual, perpetual thing that people will always point to. And, I could Southampton be the team that finally, instead of giving away their young talent, gets some young talent from somebody else? That might be the move for them. But yeah, it's That's a very difficult situation. I don't think he belongs in the Premier League, but this is a business, and sometimes we see it all the time. Like you mentioned earlier, the NFL, the NHL now, a lot of stuff is starting to crumble in that organization where people have swept things under the rug for years, and just because the player's performing or because they don't take those allegations seriously, and well, nothing was done in the courts, so he's not actually guilty, and as long as he's performing, we can all just turn a blind eye to it. So I think for him, if he hits the ground running, the sky's the limit, unfortunately. But morally, I don't think he belongs in the Premier League at this point. Like I said, takes a couple of seasons down in a lower division with the team, helps him gain promotion in some form, and has shown that he's rehabilitated himself, because I can just see this reoccurring, because I believe I might be speaking out of turn here, because I'm not really, I follow the full side of it, not so much the love part of it, but I think they're back together. I think the girl that ended up being like the whole situation was about, I'm pretty sure they're back together. So I can see this happening again,
Oh, really? See, I didn't know that. We got to get like a TMZ agent.
That's what I'm like. I think the reason it was dropped is because they rekindled their relationship. So hopefully he's rehabilitated himself, but something tells me that in a couple months, once this has kind of been re-swept under the rug, especially if he goes back to United, they welcome him back with open arms and he hits the ground running, like you had mentioned, he gets away with it. And yeah. Does he feel like he's done anything wrong? Because as a young kid, I mean, he might not, but we can only hope for the women in his life that he has rehabilitated himself and he can move on. But
yeah, I mean, in most cases, and this is like totally different case, like we had something with Keita, like, I don't know, like 2-3 years ago, and it was an allegation and went away because it was like no proof. I mean, in that case, you don't want to hold it against the guy, not because he's a Liverpool player, but there's like zero proof. Anybody can say, I can claim Ramy did something right now, so I mean, it's, anybody can claim and like dump something on somebody else, but this one had like substance to it, and I think that's why it kind of like puts it in a different light. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. I mean, like I say, I'm all for second chances, but at the same time, it kind of does not feel right. And I would think for a lot of fans, United fans, even if he comes back, I agree that there's a lot of short-term memory, but kind of like going back to the Suarez example, it just never felt right afterwards. I did not celebrate Suarez like I did before, or like I would another player. It was just something off about it. It's kind of hard to explain, but it just did not feel right. So let's get to that, actually, because I was saying this earlier, and this happened yesterday. This is like a really sore spot for me. I don't know why, but the racism and the shithousery when playing for Barcelona against us tainted his legacy a lot. And I know there was a lot of talk about him, like, celebrating and stuff like that. So yesterday in the Champions League, which we'll talk about next, 2 games yesterday that I did not even know was happening till like an hour or so before. But for Bayern, Coman scores and he doesn't celebrate because he's from there and he was in their U team and stuff like that. Is it just me that finds it, Gordon, very disrespectful to your current team when you're like, oh, I scored, but I still love them and stuff? Dude, you fucking score. I mean, there's one thing to like rub it in their face and go to their fans and like, put it in their face, but like you can still freaking celebrate. You scored in the Champions League game, dude, like instead of away game. Is it just me that I find that offensive? If I was a Bayern fan, I would find that kind of like annoying.
Yeah, especially like you said in the Champions League knockout stages. I mean, it's one thing if you score the goal that knocks them out totally of the competition, but this is the first leg. You're away from home. I get like maybe not like you said rubbing in their face, but there's something as a fan. Sometimes I watch that where the hands go up and it's like, well, it's just for show. I mean, you're not happy that you scored. Are you serious? Like, you're playing the Champions League. You're making over 100,000 a week. Like, my shirt would be off for the entire game.
I mean, it's one thing, Ramy, if it was like 3-0 to 4-0, right? And then, you say like, hey, you just high-five people and go back. It's almost like, out of respect to the other team or something like that. But this was a huge freaking goal, and it could be the decider in that tour. And not to mention, Bayern is fucking paying you. So it's like, you should probably be happy for that team at the end. Zahid says he may end up back at PSG, so maybe that's why. Yeah, I mean, is that like keeping an open door? Still love you guys. I'm just saying, and then just go back and do the kickoff. Like, I mean, where do you stand on it?
Well, yeah, I thought it was kind of funny because I saw a tweet yesterday that he scored against PSG in the Champions League final a couple years ago, and he celebrated for that goal. But I guess this one just wasn't important enough since it was a round of 16 game or something, I guess. So he just put his hands up. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because he wasn't at PSG. I mean, he was at PSG as a youth player and then left a long time ago in terms of footballing years. So it's not like he was there recently. Like I remember Mo's first season here when we played Roma. He had a brace or hat trick in the first leg, I believe, and then he put his hand up for all the goals. And I get that because he was at Roma the season before, and he probably knew everybody that was still on the team. But I doubt he played with anybody that was on that PSG squad. And it's not like he's doing the Emmanuel Adebayor running across the field and knee sliding in front of his old fans. It's just like, yeah, you can be respectful and celebrate, like I said, high five your teammates. It doesn't need to be this whole thing, but it just seems a bit, disingenuous to not celebrate against a team that you really don't know any of the players, that like you didn't play with any of them. It was a long time ago, and you scored against them a couple years ago and still celebrated. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of context depending on the situation. Like if a player was there for like 10 years and he was this long time player and they had to sell him and he scores a goal against them, I totally get that. But it's just kind of funny that's now this trend that if you spent a year on loan against a team, you're not allowed to celebrate against them. So yeah, it's kind of middle ground you need to find.
Yeah, they have like a great Greek spot in the corner over there. I don't want to really celebrate against them or anything. I mean, the thing that kills me is that don't shoot, dude. Like he acted like, oh, I didn't even mean to do that, my bad, and stuff like that. That don't fucking shoot. And my thing would be like, don't even freaking play. I mean, if you don't, I always like question your motivation. Then if you're that like sorry that you scored and feel bad, then how motivated were you? So one of them is fake. Either your non-celebration is fake or you playing is fake, and that's what like gets to me. But I'm an old guy who yells at the cloud, so that could be why. Okay, so let's get to this right here. I don't know if you guys caught any of the games yesterday. Like I say, I literally found out like an hour or so before. They were like, holy shit, there's Champions League going on. And I watched like the Bayern game. And to me, I don't know if you got a chance to see it, Gordon, but it looks like whenever I watch PSG against any team, but especially against Bayern, it feels like a team that was put together on FIFA by a 10-year-old going against a guy like us who kind of like try to put a team like I need a defensive midfielder and stuff like that. And then like, the FIFA is a 10-year-old guy. Who's the fastest? I'm going to put him on the wing and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's like a trading card game. It just, like I said earlier, I mean, it's all about making those 11 players gel and not so much the best 11 players. And PSG is the perfect example of that. Like some guys just they can't play together. And when you put too many of them on the field together, they don't work. They don't gel. The other thing that I think really that hinders PSG is the French league just sucks. And every week when you play that level of competition and then you're dropped midweek against Bayern Munich, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, that's the reason that the English teams do so well in the Champions League is because every week is a Champions League game. I mean, even when you play, I mean, look at Arsenal-Everton last week. I mean, Everton beat Arsenal. That would never happen in any other league. I mean, it does happen every once in a while, but the odds are way better in the Premier League that the bottom team is going to be the top team. And when you're not exposed to that on a weekly basis, and especially with that caliber of players, it's just a practice every single weekend. And we've had such a big break between the last Champions League game and this Champions League game that, those players were probably in second gear. And that's why I don't think PSG will ever win a Champions League like that because they just don't have the caliber of players or caliber of teams to play against weekly.
Yeah, I think because, they get maybe the chance to rest because they're always like 12 points ahead and stuff like that. So you can be like, oh, we're going to rest them. But Ramy, like Gordo says, you can rest all you want. Even when you're ready to go back, you're rested to play against like another French team and not necessarily a Champions League team like Bayern and be like, holy shit, what happened here? And it almost feels like, I mean, it's the same thing with the Premier League. I mean, if you played that's why, you can kick ass in the championship. You come up and you're like week after week, you're playing against these teams. The pace of the game when you watch it, I mean, it's huge when you watch a French league game that happened to be on TV the other day, and I was watching a little bit of it because that's what I do, junkie. And I was watching it, and I was like, yeah, it feels so slow, where there's a lot more time on the ball and stuff like that. And then you go to a Champions League match or a Premier League match, and it's totally different. I mean, like Gordon says, are they kind of like doomed because of the situation? Because I don't see the French league changing anytime soon because of the money.
Yeah, I totally agree with Gordo. It's iron sharpens iron is the phrase, and you can't expect them to come on perform with these top teams in Europe when they're playing against these. I hate to use the term, but these farmer league teams sometimes. Yeah, it's the same argument was made for Bayern a lot because Bayern would win the Bundesliga every year, and it was just very easy for them. But it was different with Bayern because at least the quality of teams in the Bundesliga is high. There's a lot of good teams there versus the French league, it's maybe 3 or 4 decent teams and then PSG. And then I want to mention something else too. Is you look at the way that squad is constructed, and it's like you guys said, it's like they just got all the highest rated players on FIFA and only forward and defense. Like you watched that game yesterday, and there's just no midfield. Verratti was playing 1-on-3 most of the time, and so yeah, you just kind of look at the way that squad is constructed, and even before for the first 65 minutes, I guess it was before Mbappe came on. They just looked dead in the water. They looked like out of ideas, no creativity, no pace on the wings, nothing. And then Mbappe came on, and the game did change. But you can't rely on one player to win you the Champions League. That's not possible. Even Cristiano Ronaldo in his prime, when they won 5 Champions League with Real Madrid, that was a well-constructed team. That was You had Modric, Kroos, Casemiro. You had that defensive line. You had Courtois. You had Keylor Navas. Like you had these players who, you had a well-constructed team. Yeah, you had a star. Or even the Messi, the Pep Guardiola days. Yeah, you had Messi, but you had Xavi and Iniesta behind him and Busquets. So it's like you have these star players, but you need to put the right people around him, or you can't expect to succeed. And you see it all the time. Look at, for example, a smaller example is City this year. Holland has 20-something goals, but you could argue that they're not as good as a team as they were last year. And it shows in their results. They're not as consistent. But yeah, they have this superstar player in Holland, but it's not as cohesive as a team. So yeah, just having a star player in this sport isn't enough. There's 11 men on the field, and so you got to have a cohesive unit just to have a chance to compete against these best teams.
Yeah, because I felt like when Mbappe came on, it was more than the fact that Mbappe came on. I think like the fans and the stadium got back into it, and that kind of like changed the game. And obviously, when Mbappe comes in, they're like, "Ooh, we got to watch for that guy." So the other team kind of plays a bit more careful. And Bayern is not the old Bayern either. Like they just don't look right, but they're a bit more solid. Like you were saying, like right in the middle, they're more like solid with like Kimmich and stuff like that. So they, you can tell it's a better built team that can kind of like control the midfield as opposed to the other guys who are just like play it long, see what happens, press R2. So
one more thing.
Go ahead.
One more thing about the French league too. They got that just to put a nail in there that league's coffin. One of the teams, Reims, is coached by Will Still. He's a 30-year-old, and he got the job. They're actually being every league game that he coaches, they're being fined like 2,000 euros because he doesn't have his coaching license. He got the job because he was really good at a football manager. And like that's the league that PSG get to play in every week. Is like just are you good at it?
That's funny. I read that story and I was like, we still have some hope, people. Like,
yeah, really, yeah.
Yeah, I had to dig out the old saved files to see if I can resurrect my football manager career. I'm like, there is still a chance.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the French league, and the funny thing about the French league is they're a bit more like cocky about it too. Like I think they think they're because like when you play in like like a Turkish team when they go to Europe, we know we're not that good, and there's something about like we're the underdog. We got to work twice as hard and stuff like that. So there is that thing going. It's against Goliath kind of an attitude from the team, knowing you're the minion and you have to work hard. You see that in some of the teams like Club Brugge and stuff like that. They know that they have to play twice as hard as normal. But I feel like the French league, especially PSG, goes a bit more cockier. Like we're in a good league already. What are you guys talking about? And then like they just don't have that extra gear that they try to put into it. Before we get to since you mentioned City, I was going to jump onto City, but what do you guys think about today's games? We'll start with you, Ramy. Club Brugge, Benfica, who are interesting matchup because one of those normal underdogs is going to make it to the next round. And then Dortmund against the struggling Chelsea, which probably should be a pretty darn good game. So what do you see happening in those?
Yeah, the Benfica game will be interesting, just to see how they look after the January window. Yeah, like you said, one of those teams will be in the quarterfinals, and it's two generally smaller clubs in the Champions League, even though Benfica's won it twice. But still, yeah, that'll be an interesting matchup. I have hope for Benfica. I think they can go far in this tournament. We'll see if that ends up being the case. And so I think they take care of business today against Club Bruges. Chelsea Dortmund's, I feel like kind of a coin toss. It's in Dortmund. Apparently, it's going to be a record attendance. Usually, their last record attendance was like 60 something thousand. They allowed more fans in, so it's going to be nearly 80,000 people in the stadium, which I think is really cool. It's going to be a good atmosphere. And Chelsea's struggling right now. They don't look the best. They're still trying to figure out how to fit all these new players together, and Graham Potter is still trying to figure out the system. But I feel like European competitions for English teams is always a little bit of a respite, a little bit of a reset. So I wouldn't use Chelsea's league form against them. So on paper, I think they are the better squad against Dortmund. So I picked Chelsea and Benfica to go through from those two ties.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chelsea they don't even know what's going to come out of it, leave alone Dortmund know what to expect out of it. And that's what makes them probably a bit more dangerous in some ways. But Gordon, what do you think? By the way, it's very okay to say I have no idea. I was watching the game yesterday and they were talking to Schmeichel before the game, and as a pundit he said, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I was like, well, great, I'm glad you're there because to provide some kind of an insight. So yeah, if you say I have no idea about today's games, I got a TV job waiting for you. But what do you think is going to happen?
He's one of the best too, because I think every time I've seen him, he said that. I don't know what's going to happen. It's like it's the best. It's like he still gets the money, and also it doesn't have to bullshit about it like everybody else does. My favorite part, just to go off on a tangent here, is when they spend the first part before the game, the pregame, talking about one team up and one team down. And halftime, the team they were talking about, like talking up, is down 2-0. They're like, we saw this from the beginning. It was always going to happen. It's like, wait, 45 minutes ago, you were just all on these guys. But no, it's like I don't watch Bruges or Benfica, but judging by their forms, I think Benfica has only lost one game in their last 5, and it was actually like a shootout loss too. So they're in much better form than Bruges, who have tied 4 out of the last 5. In terms, the one that I do know a little bit about, because I like to watch the German league, and then obviously Chelsea, I have to unfortunately pay attention to them every once in a while. I think that Dortmund's going to take Chelsea. Eventually their new guys are going to click, and this might be the game to do it. Like Ramy said, like, the Champions League kind of offers a respite, and do we know that this year? I really feel like we're doing we always do so well in the Champions League. Doesn't matter what we're doing in the actual league. So this might be the game that those guys click, but I think there's too many new guys still, and they haven't found their feet. So if this is the game they do click, Chelsea might run away with this one, but I just think Dortmund are just a better team than Chelsea at this point.
Yeah, Chelsea's like the other version of the FIFA team where you just like had the budget and spent it on the first week and bought everybody, and now you're trying to like make him work.
Right. Who's the most expensive player?
Let me use that column to narrow people down. Right. He's only rated 82, but he's expensive. So
he's got to be good, right?
And another big game today, Premier League, Arsenal City. By the way, Arteta is asking for his 2 points back. I saw, and that I was like, yeah, why don't you go to sleep, and then when you wake up, maybe the 2 points will be there. But no, there won't be. So he's asking for the 2 points. He's not gonna get them. Do you feel like, Ramy, that we're at the stage where we kind of saw this happening, but honestly, we didn't see it happening this fast? Within 2 games, they're down to like 3 points. And it's almost like when you're being chased and you look into your mirror, you're like, oh, they're right on top of me, and City is there. You think Arsenal kind of choke on this, knowing, what they're going up against? Or is this the chance for them to show they're for real and they kind of like grab that opportunity?
Yeah, it's hard to say. You look at them last year.
Okay, Schmeichel.
Yeah, you give me the pass, I'm going to use it.
I have no idea what's going to happen.
I have no idea. Someone might win, someone might lose. They might tie. Who knows? But yeah, you see last year in the race for the top 4, they kind of fell apart there towards the end. And so you kind of question whether they have the mentality to do it this year. And I think this is a good game to prove that. So if they come out, it's at home. The stadium's bumping. The fans are behind them. They get a goal. I think whoever scores first in this game is going to win. So if Arsenal gets that first goal, they can hold on and win the game. The thing is, though, I think if City wins today, they run away with the title. I don't think they look back. I think they just keep winning games and open up like a 3-6-9 lead, and then all of a sudden Arsenal's 12 points back, and we're like, oh, remember when Arsenal was in first place? I feel like it's gonna be kind of those things, and it's kind of funny just seeing the Arsenal fans. It's kind of triggering my PTSD a little bit. Just kind of go through the same things we were when City was chasing us, or when we were chasing City. It just kind of like they're saying the same exact things. So yeah, I mean, I feel for them. I'm not necessarily rooting for them, but I definitely feel for them. It's like I said, it's a sucky situation having to be in a title race with City, but I think today's crucial. And if they lose today and it's a convincing win for City, I think the title race is over.
Yeah, I agree. If City wins this, I don't know if Arsenal will recover from giving up that lead so freaking fast. And if it wasn't for Arteta, I probably would root for Arsenal. He just kind of like balances the things for me over here. Like, I don't want to root for City either for them to win. It would be nice to see a different face win for once. But you think, Gordon, that City is using their cheating as a rallying cry, and just saying like, let's go show who we are with the money, don't drop the money as we're playing, but kind of like take over Arsenal. And it's a huge story too, with Pep going against Arteta and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm gonna give my dad a shout out here, because my dad loves to turn screws, and he jumps on the Blue Moon forum every once in a while just to see what chaos is going on with the delusional fans over there. And he, after the scandal dropped, he jumped on, and he was like, it was pretty sad and somber. Like, the fans are kind of fed up, from the standpoint of the City faithful, at least the ones that jump on the forum and spew their logic. If it comes out that they are guilty, the fans are very upset. So I don't think they can use it as a rallying cry, because I think that this is a really pivotal point in the EPL. Obviously, we saw with UEFA, as Jose Mourinho, and I hate to quote Jose Mourinho, but he's like, if City weren't guilty, why did they pay $10 million? If they were guilty, if they were guilty, why didn't the ban stick? Like, either way, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So this is the point where the EPL shows that it's either corrupt as UEFA and FIFA, or that City are guilty. So it's a lose-lose, and I don't think the fans are super happy. So I'd be surprised if they use it as a rallying cry. However, I'm a little more optimistic, because Arsenal and City still have to play each other twice. So if City win this one, they can cancel it out by Arsenal beating City later, and then it's just basically 0 points and no ground is gained. I think, and I hate to say it, because like, we've been on that end so many times of either chasing or being chased by City, that we know how powerful they can be, and not to underestimate them, because they'll pick up points even when they don't deserve it. But I see the cracks that started with us in the beginning of the year is now starting with City. It takes so much to do these title challenges year after year after year. And I think the reason that we held off half a season is simply because City has a better bench, and they didn't have any injuries, and we don't have a bench, and we had a lot of injuries. And so our cracks shown a lot earlier. But watching City, they just don't look like the same motion. Like, if somebody scored against City last year, it didn't matter to me. You can ask, like, one of my best friends, Kelly. We talk about soccer all the time, and we can go back to chats, and I'll pull something up and City are down 2-0. I don't care.
Don't get excited yet. Yep.
You need 3 or 4 goals to beat City. This season, they score the goal, and they just don't. I don't have the same faith that they're going to get back into it. So I'm starting to see the same wear and tear that Liverpool has been showing all season are starting to form. The big thing, though, is Arsenal's youth. It takes a lot. The pressure of the fans every time you step on the stadium, into the stadium, in your home crowd. You've got a giant target on your back when you're at the away stands, and the closer you get to the finish line, the harder every single game gets. And most of those guys do not have the experience to deal with it. So that's going to be the big task. And that's where Arteta, I think, comes into play, is he's been in those situations, and hopefully he can corral that dressing room and shake them out of whatever stupor they're in. But it's definitely a big game. I could see City taking this one and making it very interesting, but Arsenal still, it's not like in years past where this would be the last time they face each other. Arsenal still has a chance to strike back. So I don't think this one is Arsenal's nail in the coffin if they lose, but it's definitely a step in the wrong direction. You don't want City to start sniffing blood.
Yeah, if you were like about to press the panic button, you're probably smashing it. Like if you lose this one and they're tied, like they're tied. I think, I agree. Even and on the same tone, like, when they were down 2-0, you'd still be like, what is it, 60th minute? There's plenty of time. And
Right.
at the same time, when they score first, when we watched them and we wanted to lose points, the moment they scored, they were like, fuck, this game is over. And, we were like, it was done. You don't get that feeling. I agree. I mean, it's not the same team. But so it's going to be a balance of that versus what you're saying in terms of, I mean, you listen to ex-players and they talk about how much of a mindset and a pressure it is when especially it comes down to the last 6-7 weeks where you have to go out and win and stuff like that, and how we can beat you down. City has been there, done that. They're not going to get rattled as easily as Arsenal will. Like I can see Arsenal like going down 1-0 and then just suddenly panicking and just going down 3-0 like 10 minutes later and stuff like that. Like 3 weeks to go. I just don't see City collapsing as much just because there's so much more experience. Goes back to what you were saying, Gordo, with like the youth. But before we leave over here, let's take some predictions. We don't know what the hell is going to happen like Schmeichel, but Ramy, what do you think? What do you forecast is going to happen in that game?
3-1 to City, unfortunately.
3-1 to City.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's kind of like my guess too. But Gordo, what do you have?
I'm going 2-2. I'm going tied.
Really?
Who knows?
So what do you guys watch today? What time is this one? Damn, you can watch the first 30 minutes, but then in Champions League starts. So what are you watching, Ramy?
I have City on the big screen and kind of listen to the Chelsea game on my phone.
These spoiled little kid brats watching multiple games. I don't even want to ask these questions anymore. Gordo, how many screens will you have, Gordo?
I'll have the radio. I'm tuning into the radio, the World War II, sitting around the living room.
Gather around the fireplace and like adjust the dial.
Waiting for FDR to tell us what the score is. No, I'll be driving around, so I'll probably have the City Arsenal game. I just like me. If there was somebody else, I guess maybe playing in the Champions League, I'd probably turn that one on. But I don't really care about.
Chelsea. As we're saying that, Ramy is like, "Wait, you get radio at home too? Is that a thing? I thought it was only in the car." Like,
what's the fireplace?
Well, gentlemen, thanks a lot, and thanks to those listening, sharing. As always, give us a like, give us a share, and all that good stuff. We will be back tomorrow night's Thursday night podcast. And for those fantasy nerds, Gally and Matush will be doing the fantasy show right afterwards. So back-to-back 2 hours of live over here. And I'll be back Friday morning with the morning show as we get ready for the weekend and get this winning streak going for the Reds. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. And thanks to you guys. Have a great Wednesday. Take care.
Thanks, guys.